Welcome to the Rise to Shine podcast with Noelle Kustas, where we ignite the spark to discover your favorite self. It is time to get real, ladies. Hello, and welcome back to the Rise to Shine podcast. I'm your host, Noelle Kustas. I have been anticipating this episode for weeks because today's episode is a part 2, which honestly makes me so excited because something really powerful happened. Our last conversation around peptides and hormones absolutely took off. We were literally bombarded with questions and messages, thoughts. And I just want to say, we see you, we hear you, and I love that you are leaning into this conversation with us because women were really curious and asking some of those deeper questions. And women were ready to understand this on a whole new level. And that's exactly why we are here today, because this is one of those topics that is, again, it's everywhere. And with that comes a lot of opinions. So I just want to preface this with some women are already exploring peptides and loving them. That may be you. Maybe you are curious and wanting to get more educated around peptides, around hormones. And then some of you, we know that you're listening in and thinking, I really don't know about this. I'm not sure if I feel good about all of this because it just feels like a ton of hype. Truly, all of that is welcome here today. So I believe that the more we educate ourselves, the more we can form our own opinions instead of just reacting what we are hearing out there in the wild. So I want to be really clear about the lens that we're looking through in today's conversation. This is a conversation around peptides, around hormones and women's health, especially in this season of life. And today we're going to intentionally get specific so we can go a little bit deeper in a way that you feel supported. And we took the time to gather some of the questions that kept coming up again and again. And that's what we're going to dive into today. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I highly recommend going back. Start there because that conversation laid the foundation, and honestly, it was fire. If you haven't listened to it, it's okay. You can still tune in today, listen here, then go back, however you want to do it. But we are going to be building on that conversation that we had. And then, of course, just a quick reminder that today's conversation is for educational and informational purposes only. Neither I nor my guest are providing any kind of medical advice. We're just sharing knowledge, experience, and perspective to help you feel more informed. But any decisions around your health should always be made with a qualified medical professional. And with that, I'm so excited to welcome back Iva Heckmann. Iva has been in the wellness space for over 2 decades with a background in sports medicine and nutrition. She has worked with thousands of clients. She has owned multiple fitness studios and continues to dive deep into the world of peptides, especially as it relates to women navigating perimenopause and beyond. So, Iva, welcome back. I'm so excited for part 2.
Thank you, Noelle. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so excited myself. I think the conversation we had the first time around is very important. Fire, as you said. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be here again. The interest has been so immense. It blew my mind. So many questions, so many people in my DMs and emails. I have to say, I cried a bit when I was reading some of the stories people chose to share with me. But it just kind of affirmed for me that it made a difference, and it really was important for people to hear the things we had to say. So yeah, let's go into more detail. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I so agree. And, I just want to piggyback a little bit on that because you and I have been, we're like in the text messages, we're in the DMs, and we're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I mean, we knew when we ended that episode, we were like, ooh, this was good because we knew that it needed to get out there in a very real, honest, raw way. But it wasn't until the comments started coming in, the questions, the stories. Oh my gosh. I mean, I know that I just was watching your Instagram yesterday, and someone had wrote in just such a beautiful testimony to how her life has changed. And those are the things. That's why we do what we do. And that's why I was so excited to have you back here, because I learned so much from you. And it's so great for me to have more clarity when people are coming to me asking me questions. And of course, I'm always referring to the experts, but I do feel like I am able to just have more clarity around these topics. And then also, just being able, I think it's so important to be able to form our own opinions and to do what feels right for us. And we're not here to, preach. We are here to just really give you the information. So I am really, really excited about this conversation. And like I said, we just kind of gathered, there were so many questions, you guys. We could have been here, honestly,
Mm.
for another 5 episodes. However, there were certain questions that came up pretty regularly. So we thought, let's narrow it down to that so we could get this in and at least start there. So, the one that came up the most, Eva, was all about Retatrutide or Retta.
Yeah.
People call it Retta, and I say that's Retatrutide. So, can you explain to everyone what makes this GLP different? I know we talked about it a little bit on the last episode. What makes it different? And one of the biggest follow-up questions we saw was around dosing. People are hearing different things and getting a little confused. In simple terms, how are people generally approaching this in research or practice? And is splitting doses something that's talked about?
Yeah. So Retatrutide definitely the most popular GLP right now, still in clinical trials, right? So it's not approved by the FDA. However, it's getting there. It's probably just a few months away from that. It's the type of GLP drug we haven't seen before, generation three. It activates three receptors, GLP, one, GIP, and glucagon. And the beauty of this peptide is that so far, the clinical data that has been released shows that people are losing really it's exceeding 30% of total body fat.
Mhm.
That's what the data showed with the subjects in the trial. Again, we have cholesterol levels, LDL, lowered, triglycerides lowered. We're seeing great regulation of the glucose in the bloodstream. And specifically for women, my favorite part and the reason why I'm such a huge fan of this peptide is because we don't see muscle loss with an adequate protein intake and adequate caloric intake. Muscle tissue preservation is incredible with retatrutide,
Mhm.
and it's very targeted in terms of visceral fat, right? So this is the fat that wraps around immediately around the major organs in the human body, the fat that is responsible for most chronic diseases later on in life. This fat is very hard to break down and remove with the typical diet and exercise. So that stubborn belly visceral fat is finally possible to be removed. And my other favorite part is the fact that bone density is unaffected. Now, we know that with women, with the natural decline of sex hormones during the perimenopausal window, we already have a significant bone density decline. So we don't need a double whammy. We also don't need a peptide to be eating at our bones
Yeah.
as we are compromised. So many women in perimenopause are predisposed to osteopenia, and later on, osteopenia turns into osteoporosis. Which, if you've known anyone who suffers with osteoporosis, it's an extremely painful, irreversible bone disease.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And in terms of microdosing, or what's
Uh,
more
yeah, and then like this, I think what came up too was just like the splitting of it, because I know that
splitting of
there's,
it.
yeah.
Right. And I think this is probably the most correct terminology. We can talk about the splitting of the dose, right?
Okay.
So it definitely is an approach that's taking your total weekly intake and splitting it in two or three doses over the week. because we
Uh-huh.
know that retatrutide lives in the body for 7 days. 6.5 days is like the shelf life.
Okay.
So, for instance, if a person is taking 6 milligrams in one single shot, it can be split in 3 doses, two, two, and two, right? Like spread out over the course of the week.
Okay.
I guess the idea behind it is that we're trying to create a smoother drug levels in the body during the 7 days so that there's not really big lows and highs throughout the week. So everything just remains a lot more steady. So when you do one dose, to make a comparison, when you're just injecting one dose, the concentration of the drug within the first 2 days of injecting is just getting up there, right? And then slowly drops for the rest of the week. When you have the 3 doses, let's say spread out with 1 day in between, everything is a lot more even. We have anecdotal evidence from users who say that the split dose definitely eliminates a lot of the negative side effects, a lot of, especially the gastrointestinal side effects. I
Right.
have also seen with people who are my clients, specifically women, the one shot, which is a high dose, definitely causes a ton of nausea,
Mhm.
and nobody really wants to deal with that. So the three tinier doses that still accumulate to the same at the end of the week definitely removes the nausea. Now, we don't have any clinical data on this, right? So we need to be very clear that retatrutide is being tested on subjects who are obese, they have very high body mass index, or people who are diabetic. So they, in the trial, these subjects are getting a single dose. I
Mhm.
would be really curious and really interested to see in the future someone really conclude a study done on people who maybe don't have diabetes, or people who don't have that much weight to lose. Like, let's say someone is trying to maintain, or someone is looking to lose maybe 10 to 15 pounds. And microdosing really fits those scenarios. So I would love to see some research on that in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to ask this as just kind of a follow-up question because this is one that we were talking about, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like this can go beautifully with what you were just talking about. And this is not just with retatrutide, but like with trizepatide and some, the other one that we have.
GLPs.
Yes, thank you for the other GLPs. A big question that we received was around what happens after someone reaches their goal. Is there a common approach where people transition into a lower or maintenance style dose? And just, how should women specifically, how should they be thinking about sustainability in this space long term?
I mean, I always like to say that, and I think I did say this in the first episode, that these GLPs are tools, right? The goal, as we are using them and while we have them in our toolbox, is to make as many positive lifestyle adjustments as possible. These GLPs will only amplify your efforts. However, I think microdosing is definitely appropriate for people who are looking to maintain results, or maybe they prefer a more subtle weight loss. Maybe people who are looking into not completely losing their appetite and still are wanting to keep a lot of their appetite, in fact, because let's say they're weight training and they have a higher input throughout the day, output throughout the day, sorry. And so you will see microdosing is talked about a lot on social media by social media influencers. I think it's practiced in many wellness clinics across the country as well. So it's there we see a ton of application, right? I think what I have seen in my personal experience with clients is that we see microdosing being responsible for a ton of metabolic optimization, as well as reducing inflammation all over the entire body. It supports hormone balance. I kind of don't want to say it with a promise, but it's just looking like that. So this is just to name the few. And again, no clinical data. I have not seen any. If someone has, please share. I'd love to read it. But it is there's a wide application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have noticed that as well. I hear that being talked about, like you said, by wellness clinics are talking about it, doctors are talking about it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we move forward what that all looks like in some of these clinical studies for sure. But I have definitely heard firsthand of women that have been using that as a practice, and have actually seen and felt really amazing results there. So,
Yeah.
and then also keeping track of like their blood work and all of the things to make sure that all of that is, cohesive and looking great. So, again, keeping a pulse on all of this, not just thinking of it as like the Wild West, but really keeping a pulse on this.
Yeah, especially because I think the world is waking up to the fact that the market is much larger when it comes to
Yeah,
GLPs. It's GLPs are not just for pre-diabetics and diabetics.
exactly.
They have so many other benefits and functions. And so even someone who does not need to lose weight can benefit and improve their metabolic markers, and blood panels can be looking better from one to the next, and they don't really need to be going on a really high dose. They can maintain with something very, very small.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. Well, I think that will definitely help because that is certainly something that was brought up so much across the board for both of us. Another
Mm.
topic that came up a lot is what people are calling the glow stack. Now,
Yeah.
I would love for you if you could break down what's typically included in that, what each piece is supporting, and what the name actually stands for. And then, well, let's start there and then we'll expand on that because I do think that, there's some confusion around stacking in general, but we'll talk about that. So if you could just break down what's typically included in it, what each
Yeah.
piece is supporting, and what the name actually stands for.
So the glow stack is, dare I say, probably the most popular anti-aging. Some people call it age reversal stack. It is combined. You have three peptides combined in the same vial. They basically share the vial. And those peptides are BPC 157, body protective compound 157, TB 500, which is a tiny fraction of a bigger key chain amino acid key chain, thymosin beta 4. And then we have GHK-Cu, which is a copper-based peptide. Individually, their benefits are, BPC 157 is definitely the peptide that was discovered in the gastric juices of the human gut and protects the gut, eliminates inflammation from the gut. It is very important for people who have any gastrointestinal diseases, IBD, IBS, collapsing intestinal walls, any food intolerances or full-blown allergies. People with autoimmune disorders benefit tremendously from taking BPC 157. Women with that perimenopausal bloat that's caused by the decline of hormones love using it. TB 500 is the other peptide in this blend that is commonly known for tissue regeneration. It is a very strong tissue repair, and it does have some anti-inflammatory benefits as well. Maybe not as huge as BPC 157, but they're there. I call it the skin peptide. I think it's definitely one of the skin
Hmm.
peptides that's in my top three. I think people definitely see many skin improvements. Your skin may appear brighter, younger. The elasticity of the skin is improved. And then GHK-Cu is like, I mean, it's magical. I cannot say enough about GHK-Cu. It is a peptide that works on skin and hair, but it's definitely magic when it comes to hair. It does promote a massive production of elastin and collagen in the skin and in the scalp. It also removes oxidative stress from cells in the scalp. It will reduce hair shedding, and also it will wake up dormant hair follicles. So, together, all three of them definitely provide a very comprehensive healing, but also a ton of benefits when it comes to aesthetics.
Yeah. Totally. And now, okay, so this is the second part because this was coming up a lot is how should we think about stacking? So like a glow, so if, when you're doing it together and you've got them all in one vial versus taking these individually, and what's the intention behind that? So, are there benefits? Are there, what are your thoughts around that?
Let me just ask you this. Are you just talking about why should we take them separately? Or are you talking about should we touch on all the controversy online on blends and how people are saying that this blend doesn't work essentially?
Oh, well, maybe, originally I was thinking, let's talk about what, the first one that you had mentioned. But then I'm also thinking that's probably why those questions are coming up, people not knowing whether or not they should do these separately because there's so much chatter out there of what is
Yeah.
online with blending. So let's hit them both.
Okay. So I think there's a ton of, clickbait content, of course, all over different platforms. And it's driving panic, I want to say, especially since the beginning of this year. There's so many experts saying that the blend doesn't work and it's a waste of time and money. I think the reality is quite different with blends. And I think what people should understand that this is the argument, right? Online experts are saying that when you have GHK-Cu and then TB500 and BPC 157 together sharing a vial, they technically will destroy each other. In particular, we're talking about TB500 destroying GHK-Cu or the other way around. I've heard both. Chemically speaking, TB500 has methionine in it, and GHK-Cu is copper based. Many people like to say that the copper will eventually oxidize the methionine and the blend will start to degrade. And that's why don't inject it, it's going to degrade quickly. However, I think time is of the essence. And quickly is a very relative term. What I would say is that the component of time here is something that shouldn't be disregarded because I myself, and I'm sure other people who are in the peptide space, have tested vials that are already reconstituted and we have sent them to labs. I personally have tested the Glow blend, and when it came back to me, there was zero degradation after 30 days. In reality, someone can use or should use, I should say, a Glow blend within 30 days. And if there's zero degradation after 30 days, I'm cool. To be honest with you, even if the results had came back and there was 5 to 10% degradation after 30 days, I'd still be cool because that happens to lots of other peptides, single peptides in a vial. In 30 days, we should expect that there's 5% degradation in that vial. We also have to remember that blends that are professionally formulated, a lab will definitely pH balance that blend, and they will uh, buffer it. They will just make sure that this doesn't degrade. When we talk about blends of various peptides, not even just these three in particular, I don't think that peptides actually merge into each other. I don't think that they rewrite each other's benefits. I don't think that they fuse or they mutate. So I think it's just a huge statement that it's hard to prove that they actually degrade to that extent to where we should never ever use the blend. I think they're perfect for people who are not keen on injecting, perfect for people who are just kind of dipping their toes into peptide therapy and don't want to do 3 individual injections.
Yeah.
Yeah, it saves a lot of time. And yeah, I'm cool with the blends.
Nice, nice. Well, I think that is going to be a relief for a lot of people out there because I think that becomes part of the issue, right? Is that they're going, oh my gosh, if I do all three of these separately, then that's three different injections. And, so if you can look at it and it can still maintain its integrity, then I think that's, a beautiful option for people. So I love that. Now, speaking of injectables, for women who feel hesitant around injectables, that's a great option for them. But there's also some other stuff that has come up, especially, when women have a lot of anxiety around injectables. And then there are two products, Selank and Cmax. I hope I'm pronouncing those correctly.
Yeah.
Could you talk about what these are? We hit on them a little bit in episode one, but the question that's been coming up is, are nasal sprays actually effective? Because I guess in these two particular products, that is an option. And so lots of women have been asking that.
Yeah, Cemax and Selank are two Russian peptides, Russian developed, specifically they were developed for Russian military that returned from war with PTSD, post-traumatic disorder, stress disorder. However, they are wildly used for conditions like chronic anxiety, depression, ADHD, simply to enhance cognitive function. There is a ton of data and research in progress in the rest of the world. I'm not sure that anything's happening within the United States, but they're being explored as potential preventative therapies when it comes to diseases like Alzheimer, dementia, just neurodegenerative diseases,
Oh.
and maybe not just prevention, but also just to improve the quality of life of people who already suffer with those diseases. So I've read both. In terms of the nasal formulations, I have to say, in general, I'm not a fan of nasal formulations, but for these two particular peptides, I'm all for it. And the reason why I think they're so effective in the nasal formulation is because of the specific pathway of these two peptides. The delivery through the nose makes it really quick to deliver the peptides, the compounds to the brain, since those two peptides are nootropics, and it makes them this method makes them really effective. So many users will report that, for example, Cmax, something that's administered in the morning, will kind of kick in within 30 to 60 minutes, um, and deliver a lot of cognitive enhancement, focus. And Selang, I'm finding out that most users prefer an evening administration. And so that may take a little bit longer. However, the evening administration definitely has a huge calming effect.
Mm.
At nighttime, people who are having a hard time falling asleep, and when people are stacking both of them, it seems like 1 to 2 weeks is the time frame where normally users will see much noticeable effects in terms of just lasting improvements in mood and anxiety and cognitive function.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I'm definitely hearing a lot of buzz around those two right now. And again, just, at this point, I've been hearing some really amazing, amazing things coming out from that. But this is going to lead me to a question that is just standing out to me. And again, I can't remember if we mentioned it on our first episode. We might have mentioned it when we went live together. I can't remember because we did do an Instagram live, but
Yeah.
this one stands out to me and I want to approach it with curiosity, not dismissal. There are conversations and even concerns online about how peptides might affect our mood and our emotions or how we feel mentally. And I'll be honest, this is the thing that's funny. I tend to be a bit of a skeptic myself when I, hear different things, and especially when things
Mhm.
feel like they have really become so quickly in the, forefront with social media, influencers, all of the things. But I also feel like, I've been in it long enough. I've been kind of like peeking in on this for a while now. So I have a different opinion about this just through education. But from your perspective, what do we actually know about how peptides interact with the brain and the emotional state? Probably taking away the Cmax and Selank like we were just talking about, but like in general, because there was someone that even came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm really nervous to take." They were going to be taking a GLP, and they had read that this was going to take away some of their feelings and that they weren't going to be wanting to be as intimate. So, I mean, there's definitely some things that are being said out there. So I'm just curious from your perspective.
I really think that this is a concern only when it comes to GLPs and
Mm,
not any other peptides.
okay.
Um, and I mean, I'm sad to report that I'm leaning towards the fact that this may be possible. And I'll explain. It's possible, I think, to a certain degree, but also we have to take dose into consideration. I
Okay.
don't really think that this will happen at low doses or microdosing, but at high doses, I think it's possible. And I think it will make sense once I explain it. So this is the mechanism, right? So the GLP-1 receptors, they definitely um, they're receptors in the brain, and they definitely affect the pathways of dopamine release, which dopamine release regulates the circuits of reward and emotion in the brain. Now, when we don't have as much as dopamine released within the brain, the brain starts to perceive food not as a reward. A person who's not on a GLP perceives food as pleasure and
Mm,
definitely as a reward. We reward ourselves with food daily.
right.
And so this can really dampen some emotions. It can dampen some excitement. And often it's described as that meh feeling, right? And
Yeah.
it just makes people less excited about food. So maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but maybe in general it makes people less excited about other things too, because the overall dopamine production is at lower levels. And so again, I don't think that everyone will experience it, but I think it is possible at very, very high doses. That would require a really cool study. Probably we'll start looking at the brain. Maybe one day someone will start scanning the brains of users, and that would be really, really cool to see.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're able to decipher, like, because I don't know if it's like person to person or if there's kind of like a general consensus of what this is. But when you say major high dosage or between, microdosing or high dosage or, like a normal level, what does like a high dosage? Are we able to define what that is?
Yeah, I mean, it is case by case, but I can
Yeah.
talk a little bit about it because it's actually it's a passion of mine, because I have learned that many people who tend to get their, let's just talk in terms of GLPs,
Yeah.
from their doctor's offices or 503A pharmacies, these users, they have a lot less freedom with their doses, right? Because
Right.
they come pre-made, they come with pens, they come reconstituted. However, a pharmacist decided to reconstitute it.
Yeah.
There's also inconsistency. Like I've had people tell me, like one time my tirzepatide was really strong, and then the next time my tirzepatide was really, really weak, and it didn't work.
Mhm.
However, people also don't have the ability to decide how much to inject. So if a doctor decided to put a lady who wants to lose 15 pounds on 2.5 milligrams of tirzepatide, in
Mhm.
my humble opinion, that's way too much. Most
Mm.
likely she would have lost the 15 pounds or on two tiny doses of like 5 units per week. She never needed to go to 2.5 milligrams. So for
Interesting.
someone like that, 2.5 milligrams will cause nausea, it will cause diarrhea. And then if we talk in terms of what's the highest dose I've heard someone take, I recently heard someone say that they are on 9 milligrams of retatrutide.
Wow.
Now, that's an extremely high dose,
Wow.
extremely high. And that's what I'm saying is when people are not buying from research companies, and I really wish that the stigma on research kind of gets lifted, because they are terrible research companies with terrible
Mhm.
product, and we don't know what's in it, and we don't even know if it's tested, and no one can prove that it's tested. But there are very good research companies out there with products that have all the endotoxin reports, all the certificates of analysis, everything is current, the product is good. You can reconstitute it however you want. You can make it as weak as you want, you can make it as strong as you want, and you can dose and start at a very, very tiny dose to where you don't go to these high doses, because you
Mhm.
can ride out, a user can ride out a small dose for as long as possible. They may find out that the body is performing at something low. Meanwhile, their physician put them from the get-go to a very high dose. They never even had a chance to try a low dose and see if they were actually
Interesting.
performing.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Well, that's good to know because I think that that is such clarity that, people that's what people are asking is like, well, what does it even mean to microdose? Like, what is that? And how, because they are getting things that are already pre-made for them. So it's
Yeah.
already reconstituted or it's in the pen, like you said. So it's just the
Yeah.
dosage that they are giving them, right? So if they end up having something that is, the nausea or the diarrhea, anything like that, they're on this dose and then they're thinking, oh, well, I don't want to keep doing this, rather than saying, like, hey, is there an opportunity that I can go on a lower dosage of that,
Yeah.
So
And I think that's
interesting.
sometimes the main reason why someone would switch from a 503 pharmacy or their doctor supplying them with pens. Because I recently had a client, she was given 5 milligrams of semaglutide and she was constantly getting sick. She was sick
Yeah,
all the time.
I bet.
And that 5 milligrams, I personally view it as a very high dose. And she was in her 70s.
Oh,
As much as we want to say that age doesn't matter, she's a frail lady in her 70s who is having a hard time maintaining mass. 5 milligrams of semaglutide is no joke, and is definitely making it an even bigger challenge to maintain muscle. And she was constantly sick, so she was quitting on that. And
right.
she wanted to be able to have the freedom to go on a much, much smaller dose. And I think we should have that freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think that's such great wisdom around it because that was another thing that came up. And not to say, again, this is not, I don't even know which, wellness company this was coming out of, but I had been hearing it because, like I said, if you mention peptides, especially GLPs right now, at any table with women, everybody's got a story, or I should say, 9 out of 10 people have a story around it.
Yep.
And, one of the things that I had heard too that had come up, quite a bit was that feeling like sometimes, they were like, why is it that I'm on the same dose and, I get this sent to me from, a wellness center or whatever. And I'm, it's already reconstituted. And they said, but sometimes it feels like 1 month I, I don't have any reaction. And then the next month I'm super sick, like they're questioning, like, is it working, is it, was it diluted, like what does that mean? And so I could see why you're saying how, being able to go through reputable research companies that are doing the good work and, doing your due diligence to find that, to be able to, like you said, every case is different. We're not all in the same box. And so being able to see, like, how does this make me feel, how is this reacting? And I know that, again, you had said always important to make sure that you're working, side by side with a doctor to make sure that you're looking at your blood work and things like that. So that's where I think GLPs get a bad reputation sometimes, is because sometimes there's experimenting going on or different things that are just not really paying attention. You're just listening to whatever they're telling you online. So that's why we're doing episodes like this. So that way women can be a little bit better informed. So I think that's super important. So thank you for explaining that because I was even curious about that too, because you hear microdosing and high dosage, and then you're like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
really good. Now, one of the things, because I know you're super passionate about it and you work with a lot of women that are in perimenopause, menopause. When it comes to women navigating perimenopause, where do things like hormone panels and blood work come into play? We can answer that briefly because we kind of went into that last episode. But from your perspective, adding to that, what's a thoughtful and responsible way for women to begin exploring hormones and peptides together?
I think hormones are at the basis of everything. But if someone, let's say, comes to me and they are assuming they're in active perimenopause, they haven't done blood work, but they want to start peptides, my approach usually is like, okay, let's get you feeling a little bit better. And NAD is always a great way to start. It won't fix any hormones, right? But it will give someone some energy back. Reducing inflammation with BPC 157 or peptides like KPV is another approach to perimenopause, because we know perimenopause comes with a lot of inflammation. And I always tell them, hey, if you do have a good doctor, go and do a blood panel. There are so many things that need to be looked at when it comes to the when it comes to blood panel that can help gathering more data for someone who's in the perimenopausal window. We need to look at FSH, we need to look at testosterone, free testosterone, DHT, estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, full thyroid panel, lipids. We're talking also cortisol, prolactin, vitamin B12, ferritin, iron, vitamin D, HbA1c, which is your fast glucose. So these are things that definitely all need to be looked at. And I know it's a lot, and this is like actually a question that I know you gave me that question, but it's the one that I've been asked the most. And I feel
Yeah.
so wrong even talking about hormone blood panels, but it's kind of an eye-opening as to how many women reached out to me since we recorded last, and they're in their 40s, then they have never had one done unless someone ordered one when they found out that they were pregnant in their 20s or 30s. Other than
Right.
that, they didn't go and do a hormone panel on their own. And I was just thinking, if you wanted me to cover a few of those hormones that I just
Yeah.
mentioned, the ones that are not so popular, and people are probably wondering what are these abbreviations mean.
Right.
So when we talk about FSH, this is the follicular stimulating hormone, and it's produced by the pituitary gland. It regulates the reproductive development and growth of all humans, men and women. However, it also regulates sexual function. And when this hormone is actually quite elevated, and it shows elevated on a blood panel for a woman, this indicates the start of perimenopause. It's that simple. And then we have DHT. I really want to talk about this one because so many people ask about DHT. And I can't stress enough how potent this androgen hormone is. It is many times stronger than testosterone. And it is crucial for male sexual development, for the growth of muscle tissue, for hair growth, and for prostate health. However, when it is elevated in a female body, what this hormone does, it contributes to alopecia. And
Oh,
what
interesting.
it does, it begins to shrink the follicles of hair. And it is the main hormone that is responsible for female pattern hair loss. It is so important to know, like, so many women complain of hair loss, right? And even so many women think that it's because of GLPs. But if a woman is living with elevated levels of DHT for many, many years, and nobody is treating that, and
Right.
unknowingly you're living with elevated levels of DHT, the follicles are shrinking. Eventually these follicles die, and this becomes an irreversible hair loss. So very important to have it on a blood panel. Very important to have regular blood panels and have that tested. Another good one that a good doctor will order is the sex hormone binding globulin, which is a protein. It's produced by the liver. It regulates hormones. However, it regulates other hormones like estrogen and testosterone by binding to them, and then it transports them throughout the bloodstream. So super important. It plays a role in reproductive health. So if you're a woman who is still in her fertile years, you want to know your levels of the sex hormone binding globulin, because that is going to be vital when trying to conceive. It is also really important for liver health and metabolic function overall. Something else that comes to mind is prolactin, and it is the hormone that is responsible for lactation and the health of breast tissue.
Mhm.
However, the elevated levels of prolactin can definitely cause very painful, very irregular periods, infertility, sexual dysfunction. So even if perimenopause is not on the map for you yet, and
Right.
let's say in your 20s, prolactin is something that has to be regularly tested. Lipids, a lipid panel testing all the cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglycerides, which are the fats in the bloodstream. This is
Yeah.
very important because we know as we reach perimenopause and we see that decline in hormone levels, women not only become predisposed to neurodegenerative diseases because the brain is unprotected, but cardiovascular disease is the
Mhm.
other really big risk when we don't have enough hormones or when we're not doing HRT for some reason. Some people choose not to do it.
Mhm.
Um, DHEA is something that is also important, and it's produced in the adrenal glands. It's a hormone that produces hormones like testosterone, like estrogen. So low levels of DHEA are strictly related to low libido, probably in the top three symptoms of perimenopause. Also fatigue, brain fog, and reduced muscle mass, sadly.
Mm.
So I think these are things we think about hormones or hormone panels. Oh, let's test the testosterone and the estrogen
Right.
and the progesterone. But in the hormone panels, there are hormones being produced in the entire endocrine system by various glands and various subglands, and all of that needs to be tested so that someone is metabolically optimized.
I love that. Yeah, no, I thank you. Thank you for I feel like I'm going to even go back into this episode and I'm going to be writing notes here because I am actually going in to see my doctor in just a few more weeks. And this is all just such great information because you're right. I think that so many women just naturally think it's the testosterone, the estrogen, progesterone, that's always what they're talking about. But like, go again, this is why I love you. You always go a little bit deeper and you help us to understand that because following up with that, one of the questions that started coming up was, talking about a little bit about the hormone replacement HRT, but, asking, women are actually asking, like, can peptides replace hormone replacement therapy, or are these supporting the body in completely different ways? What would you say to all of that?
Absolutely not. Peptides cannot, nothing can replace a
Exactly.
hormone. Nothing. There's really absolutely nothing out there that we know of that can replace hormones. It's
So,
they can support mm, and balance hormones to a certain degree. They can help someone deal better with symptoms of perimenopause
mhm,
and significantly diminish those symptoms or the severity of them.
mhm.
However, that it all starts with hormones. I cannot stress enough. Just hormones are so
So
crucial, so
crucial.
crucial. And
Totally.
men age in a more linear way to
Hmm.
where for a healthy male, hormone levels really don't change much up until later on in their lives. And for women, it's a lot of ups and downs
Yeah.
throughout their life. Throughout their lives, we're seeing more and more women with declining levels of various sex hormones, even in their 20s. Women who suffer from PCOS will not be hormonally optimized, just to name a few.
Yeah.
And so it is very important. I say this all the time. I wish that someone had told me when I was 18 and when I was 21 and 25 to go into a hormone panel. I wish that someone had advised me. I
Yeah.
think it would have helped so much knowing what my levels were to be able to compare to what they were in my late 30s. Like the first hormone panel that I did that had nothing to do with pregnancy was when I was 38. And I wish I had done it a lot sooner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know I think the first hormone, I think the first hormone panel that I really had run was when I was 34, and it was actually after losing two babies by miscarriage. I had had my first one, so I was like, what is happening here? And I remember it was so interesting because my male doctor was like, oh, this is just part of life. And I get that. I totally know that. But for me, I was like, I'm getting, I'm in my mid 30s, and it's not like I'm in my early 20s where I've got all this time. And so I wanted to really like dive into this. And it took me doing some research. Of course, this has been many, many years ago now. So at the time, it wasn't outwardly known to go and test your hormones for this. Like, it wasn't something people were talking about. I didn't hear it on podcasts. Social media wasn't even around at that point, barely. So it really was a conversation that I had to like dive deep in and find someone in my community that was willing to hear me out, because I didn't know what the answers were. I was like, I don't want to keep going through this if there's something that I can do, or there's something going on in my body that's not able to hold these babies. And, that was, I'll never forget her having this conversation all around hormones. And sure enough, we tested my hormones, and oh my goodness. Wow, huge wake up call for me. I had no idea that this was even a thing. And literally, once I got that all regulated, I got pregnant, was able to have a healthy baby boy, totally turned my life around. And I think that's why I just believe in it so much as well, because I feel like these hormones are for sure the backbone of for us. It's the foundation. And as
Yeah.
women, we are just going through this roller coaster throughout different periods of our lifetime. Whereas men, like you said, it's a little bit more steady, whereas we're like,
Yeah,
whoa. So yeah,
exactly.
such an important conversation. I love, love that. So you heard it here, ladies. We're not using peptides in hopes that that's going to, get all of everything done around your hormones. Like, it can be a support to you, but you really need to check in with that.
Yeah.
Very important. And then,
I think it's very important to find a way to use both. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because it is, it can just support in so many ways, which is amazing. I love that. And then as we're starting to kind of wrap it up, because again, I know we could be on here forever. One
Yeah.
of the things that I've heard you even say it several times throughout this last hour, talking about the word inflammation. And there's a lot of conversation around inflammation being at the root of so many chronic conditions. What are some of the peptides being explored in this space, and how should we think about inflammation as part of the bigger health picture as well?
Yeah, I think inflammation is chronic inflammation is very dangerous. That's as simple as I can put it. I do think that there are probably four big players here. BPC 157, which I mentioned earlier. TB 500 is another one. KPV, and then GHK-Cu. These are the four guys that reduce inflammation. BPC is derived from proteins in the gastric juices of the human gut. It does accelerate the healing of joints and tendons, also muscles, while reducing inflammation all over the body. Widely used for various autoimmune diseases. TB 500 promotes rapid tissue growth, so it would accelerate the healing of wounds. It will repair tissue while reducing the inflammation in a damaged area, whether that was an incision or someone has a tennis elbow. KPV is a really tiny, small peptide, so I think it's often overlooked, but it definitely directly acts as an anti-inflammatory response. I think it's rather quick. I don't know why. I've used it myself, so I'm not a scientist per se, but I do think that it works quite rapidly. It's really good for IBD and soothing intestinal inflammation. which is
Mm.
very common with perimenopause. And then there's another one actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's called Thymosin alpha 1. Have you heard of it before, Noelle?
You know what? That's so funny. I literally just heard about this like a couple days ago, but I had never heard of it before, and I really don't know much about it.
It's actually a very powerful immune system modulator, again, used for autoimmune diseases. I've seen the application with people who are suffering with lupus, rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm.
And so it reduces inflammation significantly. There's some studies and practices outside of the United States. I heard of many doctors' offices using thymosin alpha 1 during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic, combined with NAD for people who had severe long term side effects from experiencing difficult COVID.
Right.
Yeah, and so that guy is definitely something I shouldn't have forgotten. I don't know how I forgot about it. And then GHK-Cu. GHK-Cu is known for its role in wound healing, and it reduces inflammation and oxidative stress in the scalp. So it definitely has its role in the anti-inflammatory category for sure.
Yeah, so good. Oh my gosh, so many good ones. I'm gonna have to check out that KPV because that is one that I have not fully explored. I've heard a lot about it, but haven't
Yeah.
explored. So I love that. And again, Eva, this has been such a powerful continuation of our conversation. If there is one thing you want women to take away from this conversation, especially maybe even those that are still like feeling curious or unsure, what would that be today?
It would probably be just, I just want women to kind of relax
Oh, I love
when it
that.
comes to perimenopause. I think we're so stressed out about it. And it is a huge change. We all know that, those of us who are in it, we
Mhm.
know it's a huge change. But I think at the same time, we should start feeling a little bit lucky, even if it's tiny bit, because we have access to so much more than what our mothers had access
Mm,
to, or our grandmothers. There were no peptides around. Hormone replacement therapy had its peak, in the 90s, and then it got banned. And now it's back, and we just have options. It's so
yeah,
cool. We have access and we have options. And all we need to do is just have our eyes and ears open, and you can find a doctor. More and more doctors are on board with peptides and hormone replacement therapy as the solution to so many perimenopausal symptoms. We don't have to live with them. We can explore, we can
yeah,
try different hormone replacement therapies. There's so many different formulations, there's so many different types, there's so many different peptides. Maybe this is not your peptide, but maybe another peptide is going to be perfect for you. And just
yeah.
explore. Just go out there
Love
and explore. If you have a bad doctor who's not on board, fire them. Fire them. You have the
There you
power.
go.
Yeah, you
I
have the power, and
yes.
that's it. Relax. The power is in your hands. Go explore.
So good. So everyone, those of you that are listening, just take that breath right now and just release like some of that tension that you may be even feeling as you're listening to all of this, because I think that's just such a beautiful way to wrap this up is, ladies, we can breathe. There are options. It is not one size fits all for everybody. I know that you can sit around the table and we can all talk about it. And that's what I want to encourage you to talk about it. Don't feel shame around this. I don't think that we need to feel shame around, oh my gosh, I'm gaining a little bit of weight. What's happening? Or, I'm feeling this way. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting around a table, Eva, and we're talking about our bowel movements. Like, I was like, what is happening? But I just feel like the less shame around it that we have, the more we can be open and have these conversations. And like you said, making sure that we're looking at what are the best things for us. And if you have a doctor that is not willing to listen to you and you're struggling because you want a panel done and they're not thinking it's necessary or whatever, you have that option to find another doctor. So I just, I want you to hear that, ladies. I want you to breathe a little bit easier. It is so true that I feel like this is such a beautiful time to be living. I know there's a lot of crazy things going on in our world. However, there's a lot of beautiful things that are happening as well to have gratitude for. And this is certainly one of them. And I just want to say, Iva, thank you so much for coming back and having this conversation again. I know this is going to support so many women. And again, I know we always have it in our show notes, but some of us, want to find you right this instant. Where can we find you and connect with you and learn from you?
You can find me at Iva Heckmann on Instagram, IVA Heckmann, Heckmann. You can message me, DM me. I will respond.
Yeah.
And also Eva Heckmann, same spelling, at gmail.com. Many of you emailed me, and long emails, full stories. I loved it. I loved it. I'm not even complaining. I read it all. I cried. Uh, it was beautiful. I'm here for you. I will not dismiss you. I will guide you.
Totally.
And yeah, I'm so grateful to you, Noelle. Another great conversation. Thank you for just opening your platform to this. I think it's so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. We just adore you. And ladies, I'm very real when I say that Eva is so great at getting back with you. Please know that she does have a family and kids of her own and all of the things. So, but she always gets back to you and literally just is someone that I have come to learn so much from. I have so much respect for, and that is why she is here having this conversation with us. And to everyone listening, if this conversation did open your eyes and spark that curiosity or just made you feel a little bit more comfortable and informed, share this episode with other women in your life who may need to hear it. And again, if you haven't listened to part one yet, go back and start there because these two episodes together are so incredibly powerful. And we are, I have a feeling we're just getting started with these conversations, these types of conversations. So, as always, keep rising, keep shining, and know your best day is right here waiting for you. Again, thanks, Eva, and to everybody else, we'll see you next week. Bye, you guys. Thanks for joining me here today. Your presence means the world to me. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review, and don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Head to the show notes and let's connect. Rise to Shine Co. is ready to support you in coaching, collaboration, life tips, or even a coffee chat. Until next time, keep shining, my friends.